Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Once again, I'd like to welcome everybody to session 6. It's under the theme of Korea and ASEAN complex relations. We will have 2 sets of paper presenters. Each will be speaking for about 10 minutes and followed by a discussant who will make about 5-minute comments. I hope all the speakers will forgive me for giving so little time to each, because we will hope that the second half of our session will be devoted to questions and answer. I would encourage everybody who is attending the session to raise their questions as quick and as many as they like. But I request that you must write your questions in the chat space as soon as possible. If we have more questions than time allows, I will give freedom to the speakers to choose maybe a couple, maybe more, to answer them. Of course, if time is not enough, you can always continue the conversation with the individual speakers outside the sessions. Now, without further ado, may I invite presenters of this first paper. It's called Korea's Investment in Vietnam, a case study of the possibility of implementation of Korea's new Southern policy. Please welcome. Do we have Dr. Pham and Tuan with us today?
Hello, thanks, Ariane.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thanks to the organizer to give the opportunity to present our research in this conference. My name is Bich Ngoc, but you can me short name is Pham. This my presenter tell about the Korean investment in Vietnam, a case study on the possibility of implementation of Korean new Southern policies. This article I wrote with Dr. Vũ, an economist from the Saigon International University. Now, I tell about some interview. During last 30 years, the investment flow from the Korean to Vietnam has undergone a drastic change in terms of quantity, industry structure, technology level, investment form, and type of investor. The new Southern policy, NSP, has opened a new chapter in Seoul relations with ASEAN as ASEAN country, including Vietnam. The case of Korean business investing in Vietnam can be seen as a typical example of the NSP. Main content slides so include 3 parts. First, the Korean direct investment situation in Vietnam in the past 10 years. Second, factor affecting the flow of Korean FDI into Vietnam. Third, influence of Korean FDI viewed from the objective of the Korean NSP and the social economic development goal of Vietnam. We analyze the Korean FDI flow into Vietnam with 3 main timelines. 2015 when Wiki FTA started, 2017 NSP launch, 2019 to now affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Korean FDI in Vietnam until the end of the 2021, Korean ranked the first among 140 countries and territories investing in Vietnam, accounting for the 18% of total FDI in Vietnam. After that, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong. In this bar chart tells us that's the total registered capital and number of projects of Korean into Vietnam. You can see after signing Wiki FTA, Korean investment in Vietnam has continuously increased. By 2017, Korean registered capital into Vietnam reached the highest. After COVID-19, this amount has decreased in 2021, down 40% compared to 2017. The average size of one project has been increasing. Before Wiki FTA signed, this figure reached a high 13 million USD per project. When NSB launched, this figure is about 10 million USD. By 2021, this figure still 10 million USD. Before NSB implementation, the manufacturing industry already account for a very large proportion of Korean investment structure in Vietnam. After in NSB, this figure decreased, but still a large in the investment structure. After present, almost all of Vietnam key infrastructure and field have the present a large Korean enterprise, such as electronic industry have Samsung, distribution, wholesale and retail have Lotte, final insurance have Sinhua, energy have Dosan, petroleum, chemical have SK, and agriculture have CZ. Investment location is increased from 45 provinces to 50 provinces, and now 52 provinces of the total of the 63 provinces of Vietnam. Now I tell about factor affecting of Korean FDI flow. First, the trend of shifting FDI flow in the world, especially after the US-China trade war, the trend of the moving multinational company out of the China is becoming more and more obvious. Second, policy of the Republic of Korea. There are 3 P: people, prosperity, and peace. Prosperity including the following 5 tasks. One is improved trade and investment. Task 2 is improve the region connective. Task 3, make a route into overseas market. Task 4, grow through smart technology and new industry. Task 5, developing customized corporate, most serving the need of the partner country. To implement these 5 tasks, Korean government has not chosen to provide direct financial support. It is has opted for the indirect support through the negotiation and implementation of various trade arrangements. Third, the inner strength of Vietnam of attracting FDI from Korea. This saw up in 5 points. Point 1, Vietnam has a favorable geographical position for developing cooperative relations with Korea. Point 2, the Vietnam government has special policies in attracting foreign investors, especially land rent and tax policy. 5.3, Vietnam implement the policy of opening the economic activity participation in commitment to liberalize trade and investment. 5.4, Vietnam has abundant source of labor. Point 5, Vietnam is also a large consumer market with nearly 100 million people with a growing middle class. According to the think tank survey of the 400 Korean rich people moving financial assets were over 1 billion won. 57% of them are interested in to invest a real estate in Vietnam. Now I talk about the influence of Korean FDI on the development goal of Vietnam and the prosperity pillar of Korean NSP. Viewed from the season economic development goal of Vietnam, FDI from Korean supplement capital need, promote the shift of the economic structure, promote the process of the technologies transfer, and create more job and income to worker. View from prosperity pillar of Korean NSP to circle new market from for the Korean expect from Korean to Vietnam increase. A Korean business based in Vietnam can use new source labor resource to further grow. Export turnover of Samsung enterprise in Vietnam increased roughly 55 times from 2010 to 2021. In 2021, more than 50% of global Samsung phone production has been produced in Vietnam. Korean business also enjoy benefit from preferential policy of tax land. The total incentive that Samsung company in Vietnam received in 2016 was near 1 billion USD. Now, I have some conclusion. So far, only 30 years, but relations between the two countries have developed a rate speed in most fields, especially on economic cooperation. Two countries also have great potential and can complement each other in the process of cooperation and development. On the other hand, it is necessary to promote the balance of trade through Korean, increasing importance of Vietnam's strong product. In economic relations in the ASEAN Pacific region, Vietnam can cooperate and support Republic Korean relation with the other Southeast ASEAN country. Thanks for listening my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pham. That was very interesting stuff. I learned a lot from your presentations as someone who is not familiar with the subject. I will invite now our first discussion, Dr. Moon Ki-Bong, to say a few words about your presentation. I will also send a couple of questions to you. Have the time to read it, but please also respond to our discussion. Thank you. Now, Dr. Moon, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ariel Haryanto. First of all, I appreciate Ms. Pham Bich Ngoc and her colleague, Tuan for very informative presentation with valuable statistical figures. Through this opportunity, I'd like more focus on the new government policy of Republic of Korea. ROK will begin May 10 because our new president will start his term from 10 May. Firstly, I'd like to emphasize on the three major events accelerating ROK's FDI into Vietnam in period from 2008 through 2021, including global financial crisis in 2008 and the very meaningful agenda, which is the matter of FTA between ROK and Vietnam in 2015. And COVID-19, still we struggle against this COVID-19 from 2020. Whenever we met crises affecting bilateral trade and FDI, we turned this crisis into the opportunity to accelerating economic cooperation between two countries. And I expect bilateral economic cooperation will be strengthened after COVID-19 as well in the series of the effort to secure global value chains. In the series of the successful performance between two countries, we should touch the contribution of the new Southern policy initiated by the President Moon Jae-in. The new Southern policy, we call it NSP, is considered one of President Moon's signature foreign policy along with the new Northern policy. It was implemented in November 2015, shortly following his inauguration to foster stronger diplomatic and economic ties with Southeast Asia and India. Although it is difficult to measure the new Southern policy's success on a numerical scale, there are certain legacies that it has left for the future administration to consider adopting after May 9, since ROK's new president will inaugurate on May 10. New president, Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol, have acknowledged the importance of Southeast Asia as a strategic partner for ROK. So his ASEAN policy are likely to emphasize different priority agenda for cooperation going forward. Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol also emphasized the significance of ASEAN as an economic and strategic partner without directly referring the incumbent administration's NSP, New Southern Policy. In general, Mr. Yoon seems more likely to reform the existing New Southern Policy, unlike his opponent. He will strive for differentiation for highlighting specific agenda items such as digitalization and cybersecurity cooperation, in addition to broader ones, including denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. These goals are likely apparent in his most recent pledge on foreign affairs and national security, which proposes the ABCD strategy for approaching Southeast Asia. A stands for advanced human capital, B, build health security, C, connect cultures, and D, digitalize ASEAN infrastructure. While retaining certain aspects of the New Southern Policy, including its people pillar and the Global Health Initiative, the ABCD strategy demonstrates alignment with Mr. Yoon's larger goals of digital and economic advancement. Overall, new President Mr. Yoon is more likely to create a new backbone for his own version of New Southern Policy, draw out its effective aspects and arrange them accordingly with his new defined strategy. In 2022, even it's already April, and the near future, many economists easily predict that we will meet extremely high inflation and relatively higher interest. Furthermore, we should reconstruct global value chain with China or without China. In this regard, the economic cooperation between Vietnam and Korea should be enhanced to continue our mutual prosperity of the two countries in terms of trade, investment, and future technology, whether we call it New Southern Policy or ABCD strategy. It's the end of my comment, and thank you for your attention. Yeah, I'll hand over the microphone to the moderator, Mr. Ariel Haryanto.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moon. That was really interesting to enrich the discussion. I will also give a chance later on to Dr. Pham to respond to you if time allows. But I also would like to encourage anyone attending the session to send your questions or comments through the chat space. Please write them, and Dr. Pham and Dr. Moon might be able to respond to you as long as time allows. So now can we move on to paper number 2? It's entitled Living with Social Stigma, Indonesian Marriage Migrants in South Korea. It will be presented by Nur Aisyah Kotarumalos. Please.
Okay, thank you so much for the organizer to give me the opportunity to present my research in this respected conference. My name is Aisyah, and allow me to turn your attention to the ASEAN and people connectivity with Korea. After we have a long discussion from the perspective of institutional framework. My presentation titled Living with Stigma, Indonesian Marriage Migrants in South Korea. In Korea, marriage across national borders has never been normalized until the government initiated the migrations of mail order brides through the commercialized broker channel. It introduced firstly in the early 1990s due to the government found no other options to cope with the unmarried rural man. With the prominent Koreans positioned worldwide, the state's strategy to facilitate international marriage for their less privileged rural male was plausible. Korea's approach to deal with the shortage of brides is pretty much similar with other East Asian countries like Japan and Taiwan. So existing studies on the international marriage among the Koreans have identified several factors that contributed to the shortage of Korean brides. Demographic factors such as the imbalanced number between male and female due to the fertility decline, rise in sex ratio at birth, and sex selectivity in migrations have been responsible to the trends of marriage squeeze. The sex imbalance in the rural areas is primarily caused by the rapid pace of industrializations, which led to many rural women left their hometown to get jobs in the big cities. Along with that, the consciousness of gender equality has swept over the country, making rural women are more aware of their careers and self-actualizations. Therefore, there is a drastic shift of value in the marriage partner preference, which rural women become more attracted to urban than rural males, or even to view marriage as an option rather than as mandatory. Men who are less educated, low incomes, and living in the countryside are not deemed appealing. So through my reading my scholarship of Asian cross-border marriage, I found that the existing studies of Southeast Asians brides in the Korea and also in the international scope have been mainly centralized on the mail order brides. And especially in the within the studies of in Korea, these studies are most widely examined in the process of assimilations and integration, multiculturalism, and marriage life. So my research questions is, as Indonesians considered as marriage migrants, what kinds of experience that the Indonesian brides encounter while living in Korea? So my research thesis argues that being Southeast Asian brides are stigmatized and particularly evident in the Korean rural landscape. This is fueled by the image of a global hypergamy and also the racial hierarchies in Korea. I use a qualitative approach in depth interviews, mainly conducted through Zoom because of the social guidelines during the COVID-19. There are 14 Indonesians who participated in the study, and all of them married to Korean husband and living in Korea. The fieldwork was conducted in August to December 2021. So in this literature, I'm using in this literature review, I use the concept of stigma. So the studies of stigma has been well established among the underprivileged subject, range from Black people, prostitute, LGBT, to people who suffer from illnesses such as HIV, AIDS, dementia, and many others. The term of stigma, which became an important concept in the discipline of social science, was firstly introduced by Irving Goffman with his remarkable book titled Notes on the Management of Spoiled Identity. Its concept entails two central elements, namely the recognition of difference based on distinctive characteristics and a process of devaluations. And stigma is constructed socially, and the kinds of being stigmatized is a product of social process that differ from one context to another. Through my literature review, I found that there is kind of like Southeast Asian stigmatized identity, which has three dimensions. The first one is the existence of three racial stratifications in Korea. So Korea has a hierarchy, racial hierarchy, with the top one is the pure blood Koreans, and the second one light skin non-Koreans. So this one including Korean Americans, Korean Canadians, all the Korean diaspora from Western countries, and foreigners who have white skin. And the lower bottom one is the dark skin non-Koreans. This includes the Southeast Asian brides. And the second one, the second dimension is that the image of male older brides, which is first introduced by the state, it was targeted for the rural male who are occupied the lowest tier model of class structure. And then the third one is the global hypergamy. So Asian brides are often constructed that they married to white people or to people who come from advanced country for money. So they do not, there's an absence of emotional bonding between the couples. Okay, and then when we look at the Indonesian brides in Korea, so here in total, there were about 13,161 people, Indonesian brides, with different types of visa, student, migrant workers, marriage migrants, and others. The Indonesian marriage migrants constitute as the second largest of Indonesian community after the migrant workers. And here, if we look at among the Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia take the 5th largest of Indonesian brides. So compared to like Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, and Cambodia. All of these countries, all the transnational marriage are facilitated by the commercial arranged marriage. While Indonesia, mostly are they get to know their husband from voluntarily or meeting their husband through mutual friends or perhaps in this recent one through chatting app. And here the characteristic of the Indonesian brides from the age they are 31. The youngest one, and until 58 years old, and their marriage age is from 1 to 29 years of marriage. Their education backgrounds, most of the participants were highly educated, having a bachelor degree, and they scatter all over Korean Peninsula, although kind of like some of them living in Seoul, but the rest living in other parts of Korea, like Goje, Daegu, and others. And here, my findings that the first one is the concept of female hypergamy. So the constructions of female status hypergamy norm, where women from less developed countries partner up with men from developed countries, reflects a simple economic dichotomy shaped by the global capitalism. Among the Indonesian bride, I found there are two different narratives on how they dispute such global hypergamy. The first one, among the Indonesian elder brides who moved to Korea during the 1990s and the beginning of 2000, they did not agree with the image of upward mobility, where they migrated from less developed to advanced country like Korea. They found that the situations of Korea when they moved was not significantly different from Indonesia. And they did not perceive that marrying to a Korean man was driven by material benefits. So here's, you can read later on, but kind of like often they said that when I moved to Korea, the moment I saw Gimpo Airport, before Incheon Airport, you know, the Gimpo airport is much worse than Soekarno-Hatta in Jakarta. So Soekarno-Hatta is much more advanced and more cosmopolitan and more modern than the Gimpo. Gimpo is like very kind of very small, dark and shady. So this is the kind of like the spatial memories that they remember when they moved to Korea. And the second one, among the younger brides, the gaining popularity of Korean wave, Hallyu, in Southeast Asia seemed to have huge impact in shaping their preference in finding marriage partner. Korean men are set as desirable husband, and becoming marriage migrants pave way for consumptions of global imagination. And here, the third concept that I use is living with stigma. So what kind of stigma as the Southeast Asian brides? There are three that comes up from their excerpt, from the narrative of the participants. First, that they are often accused that they're married for money. And then second one, they are often judged that they are uneducated and poor. And especially in the rural landscape, this kind of stigma is very pertinent compared to those people who live in Seoul. But even people, for Indonesian brides who live in Seoul, they believe that this kind of stigma exists, and they often heard that their friends or they often heard from their friends that this kind of negative experience happened in Korea. So assuming in Korea, assuming the Southeast Asia brides as one category and single undifferentiated group, the Indonesian brides are often being stigmatized and marginalized like other brides from the Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. Now we reach to the conclusions. So there are four themes that I try to conclude. The first one is the knowledge production that in the existing scholarship of Southeast Asian cross-border marriage often draws on hegemonic dimensions of global hypergamy. So my thesis, my research, my articles try to kind of like put more insight to what is global to kind of like dispute this global hypergamy. And then the stigma, it is very evident that in rural South Korea, the Indonesian brides often encounter more negative experience in their daily life. And what is the policy impact for the multiculturalism in South Korea? I think that the Southeast, from the participants' narrative, they often said that we are often seen by the Korean government as the problem and the solution. So actually, there should be another addressing to kind of like educate this Korean society as well, to accept that they are already transferred to multicultural society. And the last one, my research limitation, the study focuses on an exclusive identity as Southeast Asian as a whole, without incorporating with other identities. That's all. Thank you so much.
So fascinating. Thank you so very much, Aisyah. May I now invite Dr. Jung Bub Mo to say a few words about the paper. And once again, I'd like to remind all the attendees of this session, if you have any questions or comments, please write your comments or questions on the chat space. Thank you very much. Now I turn to Dr. Jung.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And then my name is Pham Mo from the Bugyong National University. And then thank you for the Dr. Aisyah for the very interesting paper, and then also very insightful the information from the Indonesian wives in Korea. So it's quite interesting because it's not common to hear the voice of Indonesian marriage migrant in Korea. And then that reminds me of my previous interview with the Filipino marriage migrant couple, and also I encountered some Vietnamese wives in Korea. So that could be the very good comparison. And rather than just like the question, based on your very insightful information from this informant, I would suggest if you want to develop this into more like the more fruitful discussion on international marriage couple in Korea, just three dimensions. The first one is like you gave the very interesting the point because their attitude toward like the other Southeast Asian. So I wonder you might develop more about what kind of the strategy to distinguish themselves from the other Southeast Asian marriage migrants that encounter my that remind me my previous interview with other Filipino Korean marriage couple. They might say like rather than Kopino for their children, because that's very stigmatized the concept in Korea. They would rather call the just Hanpil family, like Korean the Philippine family. It's a very neutral way of distinguishing themselves. And then in their interview, they say usually say they are from Hawaii rather than the Philippines, because they felt when they say they are from the Philippines or when they are from the Hawaii, that's very different case. So now for like this example, how they distinguish themselves from other case of the international marriage couple. And then second one is like the like a language. You might say most of the informant, they said they can speak English, right? So what kind of language they are using with their husband or their family-in-law, and then their children. That's very interesting point in Korean marriage migrant in Korea. So usually from the Philippines or from the Vietnam, they are not so like comfortable to use their own language, and then because their family-in-law or their husband don't like they're using their native language. And then even so, most of them are using very, very poor Korean rather than any other language. So that's one of the some element that limit their lives in Korea. So that's a very important point. So for Indonesian couple, what kind of language in their everyday life, or what kind of language they are using with the husband and the children. I think that could be the very important the point. And then the last one is the religion. You said for Indonesian marriage migrant, religion is very important. So, but we don't have very few the information about this kind of Muslim wives in Korea. So, how they survive, or what is their coping strategy in Korea when they want to continue their religious practice in Korea, and then what kind of negotiation happen in their everyday lives. That could be very interesting point. So you might develop some kind of more in the next research or next paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Young. I really like the question about language and religions. Even if you don't include it in your paper, please tell us in the session, because this is really interesting. By the way, if I may just add one more thing, my wife loves to watch on YouTube many bloggers, what do you call it, video bloggers, telling stories about Korean and Indonesian marriage. This is more about Korean marrying Indonesian, living in Indonesia. they speak better Indonesian than I do. They become more Indonesian than I am. It's really interesting. So I don't know if this is part of your session, but apparently there's lots and lots of YouTube presentations on their stories about this. I haven't followed, but my wife keeps following that and telling me all really interesting stories about that. So we are now coming to the more interesting session, part of the session, and that is the general discussion. May I invite, first of all, Dr. Pham again, and maybe Tuan to say a few words about anything that you like to say from the comments from Dr. Moon, or from my questions, or from the attendee. I saw there's one question from the attendee. So may I now turn to Dr. Pham and Fu?
Hey, Dr. Aryan Heriato. I thank you a lot your interest in our topic and asking us questions. Vietnam always welcome foreign investors to invest in Vietnam. But from 2019, Vietnam will welcome more investors to invest in Vietnam in high-tech industry, which Vietnam needs to develop our country in the direction of high technology. The local business community is very welcome to investors. For example, Samsung LG in Vietnam has had many Vietnamese business to develop together. They are input supplier for Samsung LG. Currently, labor in Vietnam is not longer cheap, but still cheaper than China. They are more choice when more investors come to the locality. The Vietnam's government always welcome investors in Vietnam, especially in the high-tech industry. But if investors in Vietnam, including Korean, do not comply with Vietnam law, investor pressurize worker causing resistance, they need to sit down and discuss. I recommend Dr. Wu, who will answer some of your questions more clearly.
Good afternoon. My name is Wu. I am working as economics tutor in the Saigon International University. First of all, I would like to thank all of you to pay attention for our paper. Now I want to respond to some questions you raised for us. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Moon Ki-Bong for his very interesting comment. We highly appreciate your comment for paper, and we want to say something more. What you want to ask? First, we agree fully with you that the Korean new SP is one very strong factor influencing on the FDI flow in Vietnam. In our paper, we also pay attention on this factor, and we say that very interesting that Korean government have not chosen to provide the direct financial support to Korea company who investing abroad, but it had opted for indirect support through the negotiation and implementation of various trading agreement. That means the FTA and other agreement, international agreement. I think it is a fully copies with the Vietnamese policy. We Vietnamese government also consider FTA is one good policy for open our economy and for create more relation with the other country. Therefore, about your question about the joining of the Korea in TPP, how is our opinion? So last year we heard about the intent of the Korea government to join CPTPP. We think it is a new good news for not only CPTPP but also for Vietnam. The Vietnam-Korean FTA is fully copied with the CPTPP, and with the joining of the Korea in CPTPP, we can have more opportunity to cooperate not only between us but also with other countries. How about the China, Japan, when they want to join TPP? Before we think some country like America, also China want to join this agreement. I think the framework of TPP is very favorable for many countries, and if more countries join this agreement, that will do more effort for other countries to liberalization of the trade and investment. We also want to say something about the comment of Dr. Moon Ki-Bong about the new context of the development. Since some years ago, COVID-19 and also the conflict, international conflict between some country, between China and America, between Russia and Ukraine, make the international trade more complicated. Now we have the higher inflation rate, we have the higher price of the energy, of the construction material, the food also, and that makes the global economy more problem, and we have more difficulties in our development in each country. But between the Korea and Vietnam, we think that make also difficulty. But we hope that both countries, we have our policy, we have our resources to overcome these difficulties, and we think that now the trade between the country is about $100 billion, but in some 5 or 10 years, this turnover of the trade and investment will be more and more, and maybe reach 150 until $200 billion. Now I want to say about to respond to some question about our paper. First, about the question from the Dr. Aryan Harianto. We asked when this huge foreign investment in a country and the hosting government offer them a warm welcome. Usually, there are some tension and discontent among local business circle against them. Do this happen, the trend in Vietnam. Yeah, I think Vietnam is one very specific country. When the FDI flow go into Vietnam, our industry is also low developed. We have less capacity in the industry, in the other economic resources. Therefore, not only the government, but also the business sector welcome the FDI, because with FDI, our local businessmen can cooperate, can have more capacity, especially can get more, cooperation in capital, in the technical transfer, and also the management experiences. Therefore, between the Vietnamese local business circle and foreign investor, I don't think they have the conflict in the interest. And FDI also create many jobs for the people. Therefore, usually FDI enterprise pay more salary than the local management enterprises. Therefore, the population in Vietnam also welcome the FDI enterprises.
Okay, Dr. Phu, can you shorten your answer? We are running out of time a little bit. Can you wrap up now?
Okay. On the cheap labor, Dr. Pham also respond. I would like to say not about the question from the Damrong, Mr. Damrong, about is there any antagonistic attitude between the Korean investment in Vietnam? So I can say that almost no. In the first time when the Korean investor go to Vietnam, there are some conflict because we have the different, behavior in with the worker. We have the different, thinking about the culture of the employment. Therefore, they have some problem with the Korean investor. But Vietnamese side also improve the legal system. Also, they from the Korean investor, they also improve the system of management. Therefore, now I think in the Korean enterprises, the relation between the Korean investor and Vietnamese labor is, relatively good.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phu. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are running a bit of time. Can now I turn to Aisyah? Please, Aisyah, you have a lot of questions. You don't have to answer all of them. I would suggest that you prioritize the question from the attendees. Forget about my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Can I address from the discussion from Prof. Jung?
Please.
Yeah. So I would like thank you so much, Prof. Jung, for your insightful comments. So your first questions about the Indonesian attitude or practices to distance from the Southeast Asian other Southeast Asian people. I found that in the studies of stigma, it's very common that people who are being stigmatized, they are kind of like distance themselves from the stigmatized identity. In this case, for the Indonesian brides, especially in the for those who live in the rural areas, they said that they do not want to mingle with other Southeast Asian people like the Philippines, the Vietnam, because that's kind of like imposing more stigma from the Korean society. So that's one practice that they are doing it. And the second one is that in order to kind of like empower themselves, to kind of like upgrade their status, so they often use English So in the situation that they deal with the negative encounters, usually they can speak Korean right now, but when the situation was not good, so they kind of like transition themselves to speak English. So this is kind of like empower themselves that they are educated, they are not poor. So I found that those practices that happen for the Indonesian brides. So the second one for the language, so it's kind of like a develop. The beginning, usually most of them do not speak Korean, can speak Korean a little bit. Only one respondent, one couple who speak Indonesian in the beginning, because her husband already worked in Indonesia for a long time. So he already, he knows Indonesian a lot. So the rest, the Korean language is kind of like developing from little and then mixed with English, and then as the marriage progress, they kind of like get more Korean language from the from the multicultural family centers. So that's the second comment. And the third one for the religion, I found that yes, it comes up with especially with the Muslims. So this kind of like the status of hypergamy, like global hypergamy. So if for the scholarship of global hypergamy, it's always like you have this potential future husband, and then the potential future husband's kind of like, okay, I want this man, I want this woman. So I want this woman. So for the Indonesian brides, they found that I can play out my agency through my father's side. Like my father always kind of like my father always not accept my future husband. So because of the religion's considerations, Korean for the Indonesians parents, Korean husbands is constructed as drunkard, they eat pork. So it's all against halal. It's all against Muslim practices. So this kind of like extracted from the interviews. And then I found that it's really hard, especially like because I have also another informants who come from Christians or atheists. So for the Muslim families, for the Muslim couples, they found it very hard to adjust to live in Korea compared to the Christians or the atheist families. So more challenges for the Muslim because of like the husband's family, although the husband or most of them for the Muslim families, the husband converted to Islam, so they become Muslim. But it's only the husband. So the parents, the aunties, all the relatives still in their own religion. So it's kind of like giving more contestation in the daily family life in Korea. So yeah, I managed to kind of like interview from these people, but also kind of like especially with the women, like some of them said that with the recent one, like they said, you know, because of the Korean Hallyu, so most of them do not think really religions as consideration. So they just got married and then their husband converted to Islam. So it should be like the future husband should learn Islam first, then got married, not on the other way around. So you got married and then you learn Islam, because in that process, then the husband may not really accept Islam as his religion. Because
Aisyah, you need to conclude, please.
Yeah.
Time is running out.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's the.
Say one or two words more if you like.
Okay. Yeah. From Dr. Yakti. Yeah. I found that I'm not really familiar with the Filipino married with Australian, but I came across with the Monica Winata book, her study about Indonesian people who married with Australian, and it also she found that these Indonesian brides also experience stigmatization because they are used to become a bar girls. So it's not really, as related to your Prof. Ariel questions, the stigmatization is not unique, but in the Korean state, it is unique because the Korean itself just accept multiculturalism in 2006. So it's very new compared to other Western countries like Australia or America. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you so much. My apologies to all the speakers and the discussion for giving you so little time. And I also apologize for those questions that do not get the answers. I hope there'll be a continuation of this conversation individually between speakers and attendees outside the session. But we are now coming to the close of the session. I wish to thank all the speakers, the discussants, and all the attendees of this session. And also I'd like to thank the conference organizer, especially Dr. Zulkifar Rahmat, for his generous assistance. We hope you will enjoy the rest of the sessions and the conference. Thank you and bye now.